future. Developing the technology for a solar-powered flight around the world. Astronauts and satellites are under threat from the growing cloud of orbiting space junk. And people encouraged to abandon their cars for new mass transit systems. Welcome to Split Second.
Okay, everyone, we're live here. Let's stay focused.
It's the next car racing game from Disney Interactive Studios.
Cut to 18. Cut to 8.
Players are in a reality show car race, complete with lethal obstacles and booby traps triggered by drivers. Developers at Disney's Brighton-based Black Rock Studio first thought of the premise several years ago, but put the concept on hold until visual and audio technology caught up with their ideas. Creating the action sequences in a photoreal style presented the game creators with a new set of challenges. The team actually studied filmmaking techniques, particularly lighting design, to deliver the look they were after.
The racing genre has been fairly stale for the past couple of years, and we also do something that really shake that market up, something really different, which is, I think, what we've got here.
Game director Nick Baines wanted to give racers the feel of participating in a summer movie blockbuster.
It actually sets the races in the world of a reality TV show where the tracks are actually TV sets. And to make the racing entertaining, there's explosives and mechanical contraptions and all kinds of big action events that have been placed all around the track that can be triggered by the drivers as they're racing.
The Black Rock team employed new technology, including deferred rendering and fluid dynamics, to deliver the kind of image quality people are accustomed to on the movie screen.
We set out at the start to say, okay, well, why do things look so great when they're, when they're on a TV screen or when they're in a movie, and how can we recapture that in the game? And a couple of the main things we found were, one was really the lighting. And when you go to obviously a movie set and there's lights everywhere and everything is lit very specifically, whereas video games tend to have one or two lights in the environment, which can make the scene look quite flat. So our deferred renderer allows us to put literally hundreds of lights in a scene and really light it so that it does feel like it's a film set or a TV set.
Nick Baines cites big action film directors Jerry Bruckheimer and Michael Bay as influences. And no racing game is complete without a good share of crashes.
Use simulations within this program to make the explosions where they're needed, and we also have to hand animate certain parts. And then what we do is what's called rigging. We have a program that automatically puts what are called joints so that the console can read the explosions and the debris. And that's what you see here, these little blue lines, and they're following where all the debris goes.
Driver 95 is activating the girders.
For the moment, Disney is keeping details about the tracks or makes of car under wraps. Concerns about carbon emissions and rising fuel costs have prompted a German company to rethink how we use energy in shipping. The MV Beluga Sky Sails will use wind power to supplement its conventional propulsion system. When it reaches the high seas, a mast will extend at its bow and a 160 square metre towing kite will be deployed at the end of a 300 metre long cable. The kite will help to save up to 20% of the amount of fuel normally needed on a voyage from Bremerhaven to Venezuela. At the moment, the ship is being prepared for its maiden voyage. The towing kite delivers 5 times as much thrust as a conventional sail of a similar size, deployed at mast height. When not in use, the kite is stored below deck at the front of the ship. The SkySail system is used in parallel with the ship's main engine. Given optimum winds, the kite can provide half of the ship's propulsion. Deployment of the kite is controlled from the bridge, and no additional crew members are needed to operate the system.
We have no limitations at all. The kite is flying 200 meters high, and the cable on which it hangs goes straight up from the front of the ship. So it doesn't limit the navigation.
Travel times will remain the same, but costs and emissions will be reduced.
There are no regulations as nobody is using the system yet. We're the first ones testing it. Still, it makes sense to only use it on the high seas.
Close to sea level, there is a lot of wind turbulence, but at around 200 metres, the wind is more constant and can be harnessed more effectively. A wind speed of just 6 knots can save as much as 20% of the normal amount of fuel needed for a journey. Beluga Shipping believes that its investment of €500,000 will be paid off within 3 or 4 years, and the company has ordered 2 more ships fitted with the SkySail system. A group of Swiss adventurers is developing a solar-powered aeroplane. They aim to fly around the world day and night using the power from the sun. Called Solar Impulse, the developers are pushing technology to new limits at the same time as promoting renewable energy. Construction of the 61-metre wingspan solar-powered plane is underway at the Solar Impulse hangar at Dübendorf in Switzerland. Although the plane is not complete, the pilots, Bertrand Piccard and André Borschberg, have started long-duration training in a flight simulator. Because the Solar Impulse has a cruising speed of just 65 kilometres per hour, the circumglobal flight will take around 4 weeks, and the pilot will spend long stretches at the controls. Each pilot spent 25 hours non-stop in the simulator, testing the behaviour of Solar Impulse in simulated windy and turbulent conditions.
Today we can transport 1 person with renewable energy, and of course we hope that in the future, maybe with different technologies, we can transport 300 persons using only renewable energy to propel the airplane.
To conserve energy, the controls are mechanical, using the strength of the pilot to move the control surfaces. The greatest technical challenge for the solar flight is storing enough energy to keep the aircraft flying in darkness. The volcanic mountains of the Canary Islands, the observatory of Roque de los Muchachos is home to one of the most extensive systems of telescopes in the world. At an altitude of 2,400 metres on the island of La Palma, the 4.2-metre William Herschel telescope is the largest single-mirrored telescope in Europe. Research time on this telescope is in great demand. It attracts scientists from all around the world.
I think the spirit is very good. Obviously, people come from different countries. They come from England, they come from Holland, from Spain, of course. They collaborate international, so often they come with collaborators even from other countries.
British researcher Samantha Rex is developing a laser system to help astronomers reduce the distortions caused by the turbulence of the atmosphere.
So we're very excited that now we have a new facility at the telescope whereby we can create an artificial star to measure this distortion. And so what we do is we fire this green laser up into the atmosphere and we project it to a height of 15 kilometres. Okay. And then when the light comes back down into the telescope, we measure the distortion and we produce very sharp images.
The technique is already producing astounding results. Nearby, the Dutch Open Telescope is a solar observatory. It's an optical telescope used for high-resolution imaging of the solar atmosphere. The stability of the air temperatures at the high-altitude location give ideal observing conditions. Images of the surface layer of hot gas show granules and intergranular lanes produced by convection in the outer layers of the Sun. The Great Telescope of the Canary Islands is a 10.4-metre reflecting telescope with a primary mirror composed of 36 hexagonal segments. This deformable mirror can be used in conjunction with an adaptive optics system that will compensate for fluctuations in the distorting effect of the Earth's atmosphere. When calibrated via a convenient guide star, astronomers can get radically sharper images. On the neighbouring island of Tenerife, the European Space Agency's TIDA observatory is being used to track and catalogue space debris. Yuri Kusela is a space debris officer.
And this one is a space debris telescope. We use it to track high altitude debris from by geosynchronous orbits or any orbit which is crossing the geosynchronous orbit.
The debris, an unwanted byproduct of past space launches, poses a threat to satellites, while space junk crashing from orbit could be disastrous.
What you see here are the stars. They make trails like that. Anything else, for example, a comet or some other object which would not be circulating Earth, would make a trail like that. And this particle here is a debris particle. And you can see that it hasn't moved at all in our field of view compared to the stars, because we were following the debris itself. So lucky guess would be around 40 centimeter piece.
The observatory is capable of detecting objects as small as 10 or 15 centimetres across, and the centre cooperates with the US Space Surveillance Network. Over the past 30 years, the amount of space debris has increased considerably, according to ESA's models. Recently, a defunct Russian military satellite collided with an American Iridium communications satellite 800 kilometres over Siberia. The collision created a cloud of smaller debris pieces. Another ESA facility in Darmstadt, Germany, tracks debris with radar.
We have two radars mounted in this big antenna. One is for tracking the object, for finding out the position, and the other radar is for imaging the object. So we can have images, pictures, and even radar films of the object, as you might see here.
Images of the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station are clearly recognisable.
The goal of those measurements is to provide the agencies with data by which they can verify the models they are building for statistical description of the population. For example, ESA's master model, which has to be calibrated by those snapshot measurements which we do mainly by radars in low Earth orbits.
Fragments can be orbiting at speeds of 40,000 kilometres per hour, and impact with even the smallest of objects can cause immense damage. Astronauts working outside the ISS have lost tools, gloves, or even cameras that must now be tracked.
This is an aluminum sphere of 1.2 centimeter diameter, and this aluminum sphere was fired at a solid aluminum block at a velocity of 26,000 kilometers an hour. And if you do this, then this tiny object here will cause such a crater.
Up to 40% of the debris found in space has been generated by collisions. Other items, like orbiting boosters that still contain fuel, can explode, resulting in a debris cloud. Recently, a Chinese anti-satellite test resulted in more than 2,300 pieces of trackable debris, with up to 1 million smaller fragments.
We had one devastating collision at the beginning of this year, which alone cost on the order of 2,000 known objects. Today, 20 to 30% of all high-risk events, high-risk flyby events our satellites encounter are due to this Chinese anti-satellite test.
In the recent past, a fleck of paint took a chunk out of one of the space shuttle's windows, and crew on board the ISS had to wait in their emergency space capsule at the time of an approaching fragment. The Australian city of Perth has a new high-speed rail network, and the opening of the latest section was cause for celebration. The train can complete the 72-kilometre journey between the cities of Mandurah and Perth in just 48 minutes, reaching speeds of 130 kilometres per hour. At the launch, Alan Carpenter, the Premier of Western Australia.
This is a project for generations. You can't just keep cramming more buses and cars on a freeway network and thinking that's going to do the job.
Though the city is the last Australian state capital to implement a rail-based rapid transit network, the system, which is continuing to expand, is one of the most modern and efficient in the world. Benefits from the new line extend beyond users of the system. With 50,000 passengers on the line daily, traffic on the local freeway has eased. The trains are coordinated from a control centre designed to cope with the system's rapid growth. It's expected that commuter levels will double over the next 10 years. Stations and ticketing systems are also tailored to adapt to the network's continuing development. Around the world, governments are building new rail networks, but few are faced with the difficulties that Amsterdam has to overcome. A new line will run beneath the city's historic centre. 30 years ago, when the first stage of the subway was constructed, buildings above the line had to be demolished. This is not an option for the new north-south line, which has to be built through soft, wet ground without disturbing the city's 17th century architectural heritage. All of Amsterdam's old buildings rest on wooden pole foundations, so where the route passes under the old city centre, the two lines are built above and below one another in a vertical alignment, at a depth of 20 to 35 metres. It was decades before the city authorities approved the project.
Amsterdam heeft een litteken opgelopen van metro's bouwen.
The building of the previous subway line in the 70s made Amsterdam apprehensive. To build the last metro on the east side, many old buildings and houses had to be torn down, which caused a lot of protest. It's been here 30 years now, and we can't live without it. The north-south metro line is being built in a completely different way. This new line runs right through the inner city, and no buildings are allowed to be damaged. This is why many complicated techniques are being used.
The subway stations are being built before the tunnelling starts. The walls are built first, then the roof, then the rest of the work can go ahead underground. To monitor the effect of the tunnelling on above-ground structures, buildings in the area are being fitted with prism reflectors. Even the most minute change in the building's position can now be detected by measuring devices that shine infrared beams onto each mirror once an hour. They investigate if any building shifts more than 0.5 of a millimetre in any direction.
Tijdens de graafwerkzaamheden bemerkten we dat er een plotselinge verzakking.
While we were digging, we noticed that these buildings were slowly sinking. This was caused by an unintended leak during the digging process. We immediately took steps to stop the subsidence. We pumped the excavation full of water, and the leak disappeared.
An interesting discovery is that Amsterdam moves constantly, even without digging. Home DNA testing kits are experiencing a boom in the United States. For some conditions, the testing kits can reveal if a person will inherit a genetically linked disease. Holly Hadji is the primary carer for her mother, who suffers from Alzheimer's disease.
It's really hard to watch somebody disappear.
Holly is one of a growing number of Americans who are interested in home testing kits, and medical companies are keen to promote them.
We're allowing you to focus where your energies are to the disease that you may get and really try to prevent it.
However, critics say that there is also a considerable downside to home DNA testing that should not be ignored.
Get information which gives you a psychological negative impact, then you've been harmed if you weren't prepared for that.
Doctors are calling for regulation of genetic testing. And a team of genetic researchers in Australia believe they have discovered why some people recover from illness more quickly than others. Combinations of certain genes can make us more likely to suffer prolonged symptoms. This is the first study linking genetic factors with the severity of and recovery times from illness.
The people who had this high-risk gene combination, their risk of having very severe symptoms during acute illness was increased 8-fold. So they were 8 times more likely to have very severe symptoms and a prolonged illness than ones who had the opposite.
The research was based on a group of 300 people of a similar age and ethnic background.
What we found was that these people tend to make too much of these chemical cytokines during the acute phase of their infection. And these hormones or chemicals that their immune system releases actually make them feel sicker. They make them tired, lethargic, give them the malaise of an acute infection. So what we'd be aiming to do is actually modulate that and turn down this response as opposed to boosting their immune system. At the moment, they're actually overactive, not underactive.
Of the 300 patients, almost 28% were genetically predisposed to having a more severe and prolonged response to their illness. While there is a test to identify people whose immune systems overreact to illness, it's still in the experimental stages. Ultimately, the results from such a test could lead doctors to recommend vaccinations for vulnerable individuals. Finally, anthropologists are using genetic techniques to map the genome of humankind's closest ancient relative, Neanderthal man. The German-based team teased enough DNA out of 3 38,000-year-old bone fragments to isolate some 3 billion DNA base pairs. But many pairs isolated in this first draft of the Neanderthal genome are repeats, meaning this draft is only about 63% complete. The Neanderthal genome will be an important tool for researchers tracing hominid evolution and for those probing the origins of the genetic traits that have made humans dominant. A separate project in California is mapping targeted segments of the Neanderthal genome. This work has shown that it is as much as 99.5% the same as modern humans.
So the Neanderthal is our closest relative. So we can compare ourselves so far just to the chimpanzee, which is a quite distant relative. Now we can say what are the changes in our genome that are totally unique to fully modern humans. And that's an interesting list of changes to have, because among them will hide some that has to do with things like developing culture, developing technology, colonizing the whole planet.
The work rekindled a debate over whether early humans simply replaced Neanderthals, or whether the two may have interbred while they coexisted in Europe more than 30,000 years ago. So far, it appears that there is no significant trace of any crossbreeding.
So, of course, what we hope is that we will learn more about the genetic background of features typical of modern humans today. That may have to do with sociality, that may have to do with developing culture and technology and so on. And perhaps that will then help in understanding diseases that affect those features in humans, such as autism, schizophrenia, language impairment. But that's sort of a very long-term goal of this, not immediate.
Researchers are planning a range of comparative studies.